She buried the man she loved, only to discover he'd never truly left the ground. It's the kind of story that starts with a tragic accident and ends with a gut-wrenching betrayal, a plot twist so cruel it feels like fiction. But for one woman, it was devastatingly real. Her husband, her partner of a decade, hadn't just died. He had been living a complete, parallel life. Another wife, 2 children, and a whole second mortgage, all meticulously managed right under everyone's nose. The deception was so thorough, so deeply embedded in the fabric of their lives, that even his own parents, who thought they knew their son, were completely blindsided. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the obliteration of a shared reality, leaving behind a crater of lies where a life once stood. Let's call her Lila. It's close enough to her real Reddit username, u/marklies, and it maintains the fragile peace with the gods of privacy. By the time she was 28, Lila and Mark had been that couple since their sophomore year of college. 2 peas in one very photogenic, very convincing pod. Their life was a curated collection of perfect moments. They had the charming brick ranch in a quiet Denver suburb, the one with the big backyard. They had the goofy golden retriever who was convinced he was a cat, sprawling across the back of the sofa and purring with a low rumble. And they had an arsenal of inside jokes, so cheesy their friends would audibly groan and beg them to stop. They were the couple who finished each other's sentences, the ones who seemed to have won some sort of relationship lottery. Then, in 2017, the script changed. Mark's job in IT sales suddenly morphed into a more demanding role. Logistics consulting, he called it with a casual shrug, as if explaining a new preference for coffee. The new position required him to be on the road constantly, sometimes for days at a time. Lila, ever the supportive wife, adapted. She teased him about his glamorous new lifestyle, jet-setting between various Hampton inns across the mountain states. She'd ask, laughing, why he never brought back the tiny, complimentary shampoos. He'd blame TSA regulations every single time, a plausible, if repetitive, excuse. She believed him. Why on earth wouldn't she? Trust was the bedrock of their decade-long relationship. The rhythm of their life settled into a new pattern, his frequent absences punctuated by happy, intense reunions. He was a master of the grand romantic gesture, compensating for his time away with thoughtful gifts and weekend getaways. She chalked up his occasional distance and preoccupation to the stress of his demanding new career. Then came the spring of 2019. It was a Tuesday, cold and unforgiving. A patch of black ice on a mountain pass outside Vail. A jackknifed semi-trailer sliding silently across the highway. The phone call came at 2:12 a.m., a shrill, invasive ringtone that she can still hum note for note, a melody that now signals the end of her world. The funeral was a blur of black suits and sorrowful faces, packing the very church where they had exchanged their vows years earlier. Mark's parents, hollowed out by grief, clung to Lila as if she were the last buoy in a violent storm. She was their only remaining link to the son they adored. She played the part of the grieving widow because she was the grieving widow. She went home to the deafening silence of their Denver ranch, walked the dog who kept waiting by the door, and tried to learn the heartbreaking calculus of cooking for one. It was a period defined by burnt toast for dinner, quiet tears in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, and the forced cheerfulness of Therapy Tuesdays, the grim, standard-issue starter pack for navigating profound loss. 2 years crawled by. 2 years of firsts without him. The first birthday, the first anniversary, the first Christmas. Lila slowly began to piece her life back together, brick by painful brick. One crisp Saturday in the late fall of 2021, fueled by a sudden burst of organizational energy, she finally decided to tackle the crawl space. Mark had always joked it was basically Shelob's lair, a dark, spider-infested cavern of forgotten things. Armed with a headlamp and a sense of purpose, she pulled out dusty Tupperware bins filled with their old winter coats, a box of high school mixtapes they'd made for each other, and, tucked away under a heavy, dusty tarp, a small, fireproof cash box. She almost smiled. The combination? Their anniversary, of course. She rolled her eyes at his predictable sentimentality, turned the dial with practiced fingers, and the lid popped open with a soft, metallic click. The contents of the box were innocuous at first glance, but a cold dread began to seep into the edges of her consciousness. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowing paperwork, was a second set of keys on a bright red lanyard, a plain white envelope addressed simply to Mom and Dad, in Mark's familiar, blocky handwriting, and a black USB drive labeled with a single word, backup. The keys felt alien in her hand, scratched, utilitarian metal attached to a plastic tag from a credit union she'd never heard of. Her mind raced, trying to place them. A storage unit? A safety deposit box she didn't know about? She pocketed them, her fingers closing around the cold metal, and turned her attention to the envelope. Her heart began to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. With trembling hands, she slit the envelope open. The letter inside was not a will or a sentimental farewell. It was a confession. If you're reading this, the letter began, it means I've either finally come clean or, well, you know how this story ends. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. Her name is Elena. The words blurred. Elena. 2 children, a boy named Miles, 7, and a daughter, Sadie, 5. They lived in Castle Rock, a town just 35 miles south of Denver. A town they had driven through once to get barbecue, a place so unremarkable they had never thought of it again. Lila's hands shook so violently the letter fluttered to the floor like a wounded moth. The room felt like it was tilting on its axis. A second family. The phrase echoed in the silent, dusty air of the crawl space. It was impossible. It was a joke. It had to be a mistake. Fighting back a wave of nausea, she snatched the USB drive. Backup. A backup life. Her laptop was upstairs on the kitchen table. Her fingers felt clumsy and disobedient as she plugged in the drive. A single click, and a universe of deceit spilled onto her screen. Folders meticulously organized. Elena, kids, bills, mortgage. She clicked on Elena first. Photos flooded the display. Mark, grinning, in a pumpkin patch, his arm wrapped around a dark-haired woman she'd never seen before. Mark, looking proud and paternal, teaching a wobbly little boy how to ride a bicycle without training wheels. Mark at the head of a dining table, carving a Thanksgiving turkey in a kitchen that was definitively, painfully not hers. These weren't fleeting moments. They were entire seasons, whole chapters of a life lived in vibrant color. The financial folders were even more damning. Bank statements from accounts she never knew existed. A second mortgage on a house in Castle Rock, signed just 6 months after they had signed the papers for their own home. Credit card statements with a horrifyingly clear pattern. 2 sets of grocery bills, 2 pairs of kids' sneakers purchased in different sizes, 2 separate Disney Plus subscription fees. The timestamps on the files went back 7 years. 7. Her mind reeled, frantically trying to stitch together the torn fabric of her memory. Every anniversary dinner they'd shared, every late-night conversation about starting their own family, every shared toothbrush, every I love you, all of it had been braided with a lie so tight, so all-encompassing, it was strong enough to cut off her air. For hours, Lila sat frozen, staring at the screen as the life she knew dissolved around her. The grief for the husband she had mourned was replaced by a dizzying, sickening rage for the stranger he had been. Numb and untethered, she did what so many people do when their world implodes. She turned to the anonymous void of the internet. She created a throwaway Reddit account, u/throwarlies, a small act of defiance that felt both pathetic and necessary. She navigated to the r/relationships subreddit, a digital confessional for the heartbroken and bewildered. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing out a message that was both a plea for help and a scream into the abyss. My 28F husband and 30 at time of death died in a car accident 2 years ago. I'm just now starting to feel like myself again. Today, I was cleaning out her crawl space and found a lockbox. Inside was a letter from him, a USB drive, and some keys. The letter confessed everything. He had a whole other family in a town less than an hour away. Another wife or partner, Elena, 32F, and 2 kids, 7M, 5F. The USB has photos, bank statements, even a second mortgage. They were together for 7 years. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm going to be sick. What on earth do I do now? She hit post and watched the screen, half expecting her words to vanish. They didn't. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had rocketed to the top of the subreddit. 47,000 upvotes. Thousands of comments. The collective gasp of the internet. The comments were a tidal wave of shock, sympathy, and, most surprisingly, practical advice. Up, so sorry. First things first, breathe. Second, lawyer up. Yesterday, check the beneficiaries on his life insurance policy immediately. This could get very messy very fast. You need to pull the full autopsy and police report from the crash. I hate to even say this, but you have to consider if the crash was really an accident. The suggestion sent a chill down her spine. a possibility too dark to contemplate. Then came the internet detectives, the Redditors who dove into the puzzle with a startling efficiency. Someone dropped a public access link to Colorado's county property records. With a sense of dread, Lila typed Mark's name into the search bar. She clicked, and the screen refreshed. There it was in stark, undeniable black and white, a property in Castle Rock, held in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It now belonged to Elena, free and clear. The house had passed to her automatically upon his death, completely bypassing probate and, by extension, Lila. Another user, a paralegal from the sound of it, chimed in with a chilling warning. Be careful. OP. Colorado's laws on child support are complex. The obligation doesn't necessarily die with the parent. His estate, what's left of it, could be on the hook for his children's future support. You need to understand your financial exposure. Lila let out a sound, one sharp, humorless bark of a laugh that sent the dog scrambling from the room. Her husband was not only a bigamist and a liar, but he had also left behind a legal and financial minefield. She sat there for the rest of the night, hitting refresh, reading every comment, absorbing the advice and the horror of strangers. Finally, a moderator stepped in and locked the thread with a small, green shield icon next to the title. OP has received adequate advice. This thread has run its course. Update us when you can, OP. We're with you. She typed a quick reply, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. I will. Thank you. Lila waited. She let Halloween pass in a blur of neighborhood noise. Then Thanksgiving, a hollow affair with her own parents who couldn't understand her sudden, withdrawn silence. She waited through the relentless cheer of the Christmas season, half hoping, half praying that this was all some elaborate, cosmic clerical error, a terrible dream from which she would soon wake. But the red lanyard keys sat on her kitchen counter, a constant, gleaming reminder of the truth. Finally, in the gray, quiet days of early January, she knew she couldn't put it off any longer. She got in her car and drove south on the I-25, the keys now hanging from her rearview mirror, jangling with every bump and turn like a perverse wind chime. The 35-mile drive from Denver to Castle Rock felt like a journey to another planet. The familiar cityscape gave way to rolling hills and sprawling suburban developments, a landscape that was both beautiful and utterly alien. She found the house easily. It was a beige stucco two-story, indistinguishable from a dozen others on the block. A small, plastic tricycle was overturned on the porch, and a snowman in the front yard was listing heavily to one side, as if it had had one too many eggnogs. Lila parked across the street, her heart hammering against her ribs. She sat for 10 minutes, her hand on the door handle, telling herself to just drive away. But she couldn't. She had to see. Before she could chicken out, the front door of the house opened. A woman with dark hair pulled into a messy bun stepped out onto the porch, a toddler balanced expertly on her hip. Their eyes met across the quiet street. You're Lila, the woman said. It wasn't a question. Lila got out of the car, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The toddler on the woman's hip had Mark's exact cowlick. It didn't go inside. They talked on the cold porch steps while the faint sound of the children's show Bluey drifted through the closed door. Elena's story tumbled out, not with anger, but with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Mark had told her he was divorced, a bitter, messy affair. He'd even produced a final decree that he'd clearly forged at a Kinko's, a document she never had any reason to question. His life was a carefully constructed lie built on business trips north to Denver, overnight stays for client meetings, and endless, detailed horror stories about the terrible breakfast at the Hampton Inn. She bought every word of it. Why wouldn't she? They sat there for hours as the winter sun began to set, swapping timelines and matching the jagged, painful edges of their two lives. The overlaps were gut-wrenching. Lila's first miscarriage, a loss that had shattered her. It was the same week Sadie was born. Mark had been stuck in a blizzard near Cheyenne, unable to get home. In reality, he was at the Castle Rock Hospital, cutting his daughter's umbilical cord before rushing back to Denver with a bouquet of wilted gas station flowers for his grieving wife. The infamous bachelor party weekend he'd taken to Las Vegas with his friends? That was the weekend he and Elena had closed on the Castle Rock house. Their last anniversary dinner, a fancy fondue place downtown that Lila had been so excited about. In the middle of dipping a piece of bread into the cheese, he'd pulled out his phone. He'd smiled at Lila and said, just a quick work thing. Then he texted Elena, working late again, my love. Thinking of you. I love you. They sat in silence until the sky bled from blue to a soft, bruised lavender. They exchanged phone numbers, but didn't hug. The situation was too raw, too fragile for that kind of intimacy. Elena promised to scan and email any other documents she found. As Lila drove away, she turned on her windshield wipers out of sheer habit, their rhythmic squeak on the dry glass the only sound in the car. Mark's parents, Gloria and Arthur, lived in the manufactured bliss of a sunny Arizona retirement community. Their life was a peaceful tableau of ceramic garden frogs, weekly golf games, and a mantelpiece crowded with family photos that, Lila now realized, stopped abruptly at Mark's college graduation. She knew she had to tell them. They deserved to know the truth about their son, but the thought of detonating their world filled her with a profound dread. She booked a flight and landed on their doorstep 2 days later, the confessional letter from the fireproof box clutched in her hand like a verdict. Gloria opened the door, her face wreathed in a welcoming smile that instantly faltered. She took one look at Lila's pale, drawn face and whispered, "Oh, honey, what is it?" They sat in the sunroom, a bright, airy space that suddenly felt like a sterile interrogation room. Gloria's Sudoku book lay forgotten on the coffee table. She read the letter twice, her hand flying her mouth. Without a word, she walked to the kitchen and returned with a dusty bottle of peach schnapps and 3 small shot glasses. Arthur arrived home from his golf game an hour later, tanned and cheerful. He read the letter standing up, his face draining of all color until it was the shade of old, brittle paper. "This is a scam," he said, his voice thin. "You're sure this woman isn't just some grifter running a scam?" For an answer, Lila pulled out her phone and showed him one of the photos from the USB drive. It was a picture of Mark in a hospital bed, holding a newborn Miles. His hospital wristband, with his full name and date of birth, was clear as day. The argument died on Arthur's lips. They called Elena on speakerphone. Arthur's questions were gentle at first, full of a father's disbelief. Elena's answers were calm, measured, and layered with her own 7 years of exhaustion. She recounted the same stories, the same lies, the same meticulously crafted deception. When they finally hung up, Gloria silently refilled the shot glasses. Arthur just stared at the slowly rotating ceiling fan, whispering to no one in particular. All those Christmases, we always asked him why he wouldn't let us take pictures. He said he just hated photos. 2 days later, just before Lila left, a box was mailed from Arizona to an address in Castle Rock. It contained Mark's first childhood baseball glove, his well-worn Star Wars bedsheets, and a dog-eared copy of Goodnight Moon. At the airport, Arthur hugged Lila so hard she felt her spine crack. He pulled back, his eyes swimming with tears. "We lost our son twice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry you only had to lose your husband once." She boarded the plane empty-handed, her eyes still leaking, the weight in her chest feeling both lighter and infinitely heavier at the same time. 2 nights after returning to the crushing silence of her Denver home, Lila logged back into Reddit. She navigated to a different community this time, r/true off my chest, a place for unburdening, not for advice. She began to type. Title, "Update, I met the other woman. Turns out we're both victims of the same ghost." The post was shorter this time, tired but honest. She laid out the facts of her visits to Castle Rock in Arizona. She wrote that Elena seemed like a decent person, caught in the same web of lies. The kids were sweet and innocent. She confirmed that, after speaking with a lawyer, there would be no lawsuit. The house was legally Elena's, and fighting it would cost more in legal fees and emotional turmoil than she would ever see in return. She ended the post with a simple, stark message. If you're the one out there living a double life, if you're cheating, stop. Just stop. You think you're protecting people, but you're not. You're just burying a minefield for the people you claim to love to stumble across after you're gone. The shrapnel from your secrets will hurt them more than the truth ever could. The comments flooded in again, but this time they were different, softer. "You're handling this with so much grace. OP, write a book. Seriously, we're going to need the dog tax. A picture of the good boy who's been with you through all of this. Your therapy is clearly working. We're all so proud of you for facing this head on." She read through a few dozen before closing the laptop. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and found the number for Elena. She hesitated for only a second before typing a message. "Miles' birthday is next week, right? I was thinking of going to the zoo. Want to come with?" A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. The reply from Elena wasn't words, but an emoji of 2 penguins high-fiving. Lila laughed. It wasn't the sharp, bitter bark from before. It was a loud, honest, unrestrained laugh, a sound that felt like the first real, genuine thing she had produced in years. A tiny flicker of hope. She still posts updates occasionally, and she still answers direct messages from strangers who are just beginning to dig up their own buried bombs. If you have a story, a late discovery betrayal, a secret life, or any other tale of hidden truths, drop in the comments below. Or come find the subreddit stories thread we host. We read through them every single week. Like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're carrying a secret so heavy it's starting to bend your spine, maybe it's time to set it down before it becomes someone else's archaeology project.